Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Perez, and I want to thank everyone for coming to this month's web workshop. So today's topic is going to be PM inspection rounds and asset hierarchy. So just a few items before we start. This session is going to be recorded, and it will be posted to eMaint University later on. So everyone else's phone is going to be muted, but we do have a question system. So you can type your questions in at any time. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll be answering those questions. All right, so here are the topics I'm going to be covering today. So our first topic is going to be tasks and PM creation. And we're also going to be covering child assets. And we're also, after that, we're going to go and cover in more detail task and task procedures, the creation of those. And then we're going to get into inspection-based PMs. All right, so here are the configurations that I used or that I'm going to show you during this presentation. So most of these here are optional. The meat of this presentation is going to be the PM inspection rounds configuration. And this configuration I have listed as required. The other configurations inside here are not required, but do make the process much easier when you're setting up the inspection rounds and also help for the managing of those assets after they have inspections on them. All right, so let's first cover child assets. So the features of child assets, the idea of it is we have a configuration inside the account that will allow you to have a hierarchy with your assets. So your hierarchy will be your parent asset and then your children assets underneath that. And we have inspection rounds that you can use with those child assets. Like I mentioned, it's not required to have the child assets for the inspection rounds, but it does make it a lot easier. So it'll allow you to sort by the parent ID for easier creation and management. It'll also allow you to find information faster. So the related tables with the child assets, you'd be able to see the inspections for those individual assets as well as with the parent asset. And of course, machines with many parts, having a large amount of parts for a asset or a subparts for a asset that you want to perform individual work on is a common practice in the maintenance industry, and having a work order for a entire asset system really cuts down on all of the work orders that would have ended up getting created if you had created one for each individual asset. All right, so let's cover going through the system and creating those child assets. So the first way that you can go and create a child asset in the system is by going through the list view. So you could head over to the list view and click over here on this little plus button, and then it'll bring you into this screen here. And from here, you can add your parent asset ID. So the parent asset ID is going to determine what child this asset is. If there's no parent asset, then it's just a regular asset, or it might even be a parent. And on the asset ID here, you'd fill that in and your asset description, and you'd fill all of this information like if it were a normal asset. And then next, like I mentioned, with the asset lookup, which I was clicking on over here, you can see for getting the parent asset, it'll bring up this screen, and you have the ability to search with different criteria. For example, you could even search by a parent asset ID. If you were looking for a specific parent asset that you were looking to model this after. So here I had selected parent asset ID 6000, and then I'm going to click Save Changes. And inside here, you can see in the related table, you would now have child assets in here. So I had multiple child assets already. So that's why you're seeing a few in here. So let's go into the system in just a moment and create a child asset ourselves. So you can see here, I had another way of creating a child asset from clicking from the related table of the parent asset, the add new record. But I have an even easier way of creating a child asset after you've got your first child asset in the system. So here I am in eMaint. So I'm going to head over to our assets. And here I am on a asset here. So this is the master asset I have, or the parent asset I have for all my fire extinguishers. So a common practice is to inspect fire extinguishers. So for a inspection, you would generally want to have a single work order for a person to go and create or to inspect all of the fire extinguishers and mark off that the inspection went well. So with that in mind, we have the child asset here. So all these child assets that are associated with this parent asset here. So I'm going to, instead of clicking on add new record, like I was mentioning before, I'm going to click on go to. And the cool thing about this is you could just click copy add, and we can just type in our asset ID here. And pretty much we're all set. We just click save. And there we go. So now we have this, this additional asset that we added fairly quickly just by going over to one of the child assets and then hitting copy add. So you can use that to create multiple assets quickly. We also can import in assets to have them done quickly as well if you have them all laid out on an Excel sheet. Oh, and so something else that was just mentioned inside the questions that I'd like to bring up. So generally, your parent asset doesn't have to be a real asset inside the system. So for example, this one here is not a real asset. So this is just a placeholder asset that was created to have a parent for all the children to go into. So in some cases, you will have a real parent asset, like I had mentioned before, with the use case that you have a machine and you have all these subcomponents inside them with a hierarchy that's associated with them. But in this case, we just have a master asset that doesn't really exist. It's just to denote the entirety of all of the fire extinguishers for this building. All right, and so let's head over back to the slides here. And we're going to be covering the tasks now. So to create a task, just like with other records inside the system, you would head over to that table and then you'd hit add. You also have, of course, the copy add button that I had just showed previously. So if this were a task similar to another task, you could use that instead. And then you'd want to fill out the task information. So here I call this a quarterly fire extinguisher inspection. I put the detailed description inside here of the steps that that user would have to perform when they're doing the inspection. And then I save that record And you can see here, I have some task procedures. So I went over to the related table for that task after it was created, and I clicked on this add new record here, and I created a task procedure by filling out this information and saving the record. And just like before, if you already have the info inside for a procedure like this one here, where it's essentially just the same thing repeated over and over for different assets, you could just go in and click the copy add. And that's mentioned here briefly, going into the copy add and then creating the exact same asset, or excuse me, the exact same procedure for another asset. So let's go into the system and create those. So over here, I'm going to navigate to the tasks. And here I have that task that I had created before. So let's go ahead and just copy add this one. So this one's going to be a little bit different though. This one is going to be a monthly inspection. And we're going to save this. And now on our related table, we're going to add a new record. And we're going to put our sequence in. And our procedure name. And we're going to select a asset from the list here by clicking on this little magnifying glass icon. So here I have asset ID 6000 in my filter. So I'm going to clear this out. That happens to be my parent asset ID. So I'm going to search for that inside parent asset ID here. And here we have all those assets. So I'm going to select that here. So 6001, and that's going to transfer over. And this is a really helpful way of finding child assets or all the assets that are going to be associated with a inspection where you're creating the rounds. So if they happen to have all the same asset ID here, and you know them off the top of your head, you can just fill them in here by typing it in. But for those who don't know what that asset ID is going to be off the top of their head, they will probably need to use this magnifying glass and then search for the parent asset ID. And in here, we're going to finish this off by putting in our description. So our description will be see work description for full steps of how to complete fire inspection. And then we're just going to save this here. All right, and we could just keep copying, adding these for our additional assets. All right, and so there we go. We have all of our tasks in here now. So let's head back to the slides and cover the PM portion. So the inspection PMs are going to be the bulk of this here. So the purpose for creating that task was so that we can have all of the information that we need for this PM pre-listed out into a task so that we can select it at a later date if we have multiple PMs of the same kind. So here are the features of the automated or of the PM inspections. So the PM inspections will automatically create a work order just like a regular PM once the specific next PM date is reached. If you have a monthly PM, it'll trigger every month on that date. If you have a daily, it'll trigger every day. If you have a quarterly, it'll trigger every 3 months. So the idea behind this is you have this PM work order that will automatically generate, and you can have it notify a department or a user to inform them that a inspection has been created and it needs to be done. And based off of that inspection work order that gets created, you then can check off on the individual assets and pass them or fail them. If you pass them, then no further action needs to be taken. If you fail them, then it means that a new work order will be automatically created for that asset, so that way the asset can have whatever the issue was corrected. And really, the big feature of this is that you're also cutting down a lot on work orders. So if you had, like in my example, a master asset that has 5 child assets inside it, you would usually create a PM for each individual asset. But a PM of this nature, really, it takes 30 seconds to complete that work order. So the idea behind it is you're grouping all of those work orders into one. That way, the individual user who gets this task or gets this work order can walk through the plant, make sure everything is good, and not waste extra time shuffling through multiple work orders and trying to figure out which ones they have and haven't done yet. So really, it cuts down on the amount of time and the amount of management that you have to do later on when you're looking through all the work orders, or you would have been looking through all the work orders in the system. And we will be covering that a little bit more when we get over to the related tables of the assets. But for now, let's cover, just go over the inspection rounds, getting those created. So over here in this example, I have a asset. So this is my parent asset. So I'm going to click over here to add a new record to the parent asset. And then I'm going to get a screen that looks like this. So most of the asset information is going to be, so the asset ID and the PM ID are all going to be automatically filled in. So the sections that you're going to have to make sure you fill in are the calendar-based section. So this way you can set the PM to trigger on a certain schedule. So this here is a quarterly PM. Here you can see quarterly fire extinguishers. So this is going to be every 3 months, and this is going to be set for that date. So the calendar frequency type here that you see is set as static. This means that it will always trigger every 3 months on the dot. The other option we have is a shadow based PM. So a shadow-based PM would, instead of triggering every month, every 3 months on the dot, it would be triggering 3 months after the last work order was closed. So generally with inspections, you want to have them using static, because that way it will trigger every 3 months on the dot, regardless of whether the user has completed the inspection on time. And below that, we have the assigned to type and assigned to. So this is going to be how your employee gets informed that the inspection gets created and is now available for them to do. You could also, like I mentioned, have this assigned to a specific department, so that way that department receives a notification instead of a specific employee. And then next is the task. So the task number here, you could just click on this little magnifying glass, and just like before, you'll search through the list and find that that task that we had just created, and then it's just going to automatically populate all this information here that we had wrote previously. All right, so after you've created the PM, if you have one of the configurations that I had mentioned before, which was the work procedures or the PM procedures synchronization, then your PM procedures will automatically be populated in based off of the task number that you put into the PM. If not, then you would have to go to that task and then publish it so that it publishes all of those task procedures to the PMs that were associated with it. So let's go ahead and show that process. So here's that task that we had created. So we're going to be using that inside of the PM. So we're going to click on assets here. And here's our parent asset. So let's head over to PM schedule and add a new record. So this one here is going to be a monthly. So we're going to set this to 1. We're going to set this to months. And we're going to set this to static, and we'll have the next PM to be the first. All right, and so coming down here, we can select an employee. So I'm going to click on that magnifying glass, and I'll assign it to myself. And then over here inside the task number, we're just going to click on that magnifying glass, and we're going to search for that task we created, and there it is. So that's our monthly fire extinguisher inspection. So we select that, and our brief description and our detailed description fill in, and we can go ahead and save this record. And there we go. We have our PM, and we should have all of our PM procedures already filled in here. And you can see we have all 5 of them in here. If you did not have the configuration that I had mentioned before, then you would have to publish the task to get the procedures onto the PM. So you would head over to the task table, and you would head to this procedure, and then you would just click on actions and then click publish and then proceed. And that would distribute it to all the PMs that have that task number on them. All right, so the other section, the next section that we're going to be talking about is the work orders that get created from these inspection PMs. So once you have the PM schedule set up, like I mentioned, you can have it automatic so that it will generate on a specific set criteria, or you can go in and generate it beforehand if you feel it needs to be generated. So over here in our work order, this is the work order that was created from that calendar or that PM. You would navigate to your related table, and you would head over to your work procedures, and you should have this button here that says edit. So this is a part of the PM inspection configuration. So once you click edit, you're going to see see these open up a little bit. So over here we have a few fields, some of which are optional. So the variable reading field is a optional field. So this would be usually for oil measurements, things along those lines, where you want to have a reading that accompanies whether something was pass or fail. And with the pass and fail, we have a P and F, P for pass, F for fail. And if you pass it, then no further action is needed. If you fail it, then it means that we need to create a new work order. And so over here, I put comments in saying that this fire extinguisher was missing and it needs a replacement. And then afterwards, I went ahead and saved those. So even after you save the the work order procedures, it doesn't automatically create a work order the second you save it. And the idea behind this is you may have not completed all of the individual procedures that are associated, and the work order needs to get closed out so that basically it can be signed off by a manager in most cases. Very often I see in in some industries that they'll have someone who signs off on the inspections after someone has gone through and checked it to make sure that they are doing them correctly, or at least filling all of the inspections that were on of the procedures. All right. And so to complete the work order after all the inspections are done, you can go to the record detail screen and then go to actions and then click closeout. And so by clicking the closeout, you're going to see a screen that looks like this one on the left-hand side. And this closeout screen is going to vary a little bit from account to account. Generally, the closeout fields you're going to have based off of the needs of your account. So inside my account, I have it set up with that industry practice in mind, where someone signs off on the procedures after the fact, after the other user has gone in and done those procedures. So here in the comments, I wrote all inspections complete, and I put a signature in here on the supervisor signature field. And then I clicked close out work order. And afterwards, the work order was closed and a new follow-up work order was created. And to show that, we record the follow-up work order number inside of the related table where we were creating and editing the procedures. So I navigated to the related table and then clicked over here to see the new work order that was created, which was 599. And then by clicking on that work order, it navigated me to the new work order screen where you could see this work order came originally from inspection work order 598. And the work description here says inspection failure, gives you the information of what the PM, or what the task name was, and the steps in the work order description, along with the the comments of the extinguisher being missing and it needing a replacement. All right, so let's go ahead and generate our own work order before the PM would have generated normally, so that we can go through that process. So heading over here, going to the asset, this is the monthly fire extinguisher inspection, so I'm going to click on that one. All right, and from our record details, I'm going to click manually generate. And this is just a few extra steps that I'm taking so that we can create this work order before its actual predetermined generation date. All right, so here we have our work order. We have the work description that's letting us know what we need to do to pass this inspection. And I'm going to head over to our related table. And I'm just going to click edit here. And then we can pass these. And let's fail this one. So inside our comment, let's say, just like before, missing fire extinguisher needs replacement. All right, and we can save this now. And there we go. So we have 4 passes, 1 fail, and we can head over to our record details and close out this work order. And in here in comments, we'll write 1 inspection failed, all others passed. And I'll put my initials and close out the work order. Oh, actually, I have a required field on downtime. So let me fill that in real quick. And now I'm going to close out the work order. All right, so our work order is closed. And if we head over to related tables, you can see here we have that new inspection work order that was created. So if I click on that, it'll bring me over to the work order, and I can see the details of this comment saying that the extinguisher is missing and it needs a replacement. All right, so let's head over back to the slides. And I want to cover some of the inspection history. So like I had mentioned before, you have a inspection history table or a general work history table. And by looking at that parent asset, you're going to be able to see all of the inspections that were put to that asset. And you also have a additional table that is the individual inspections for those assets. So generally you would see only when the assets were failed and became a work order. But with the other configuration, you have the ability to see, whoops. You have the ability to see the individual inspections for those child assets. So all the inspections, regardless of whether they were pass or fail, you can see those on the assets or on the child assets in this history table. So that's something that can be set up. Not everyone wants to see that, so it'd be something that you should mention when you ask for this configuration. And so let's head over and show the new inspections that we had just created, showing inside the tables. So if we head over to our parent asset, I have this table here, child assets, where you can see all your child assets. We have our work order history. And if I filter this here, you can see we have the work order that we had just created, work order 600. And for the child asset, if we head over to child asset, let's go to this one here, 605, and I click on the asset procedure history. You can see here the procedure that we had failed before that ended up becoming a work order. So just a couple of the ways that you can view this information. Of course, we also have reporting, and via the reporting screen, you can pretty much view anything. It's very flexible in the sense that you can search for a parent asset and then view all of the individual procedures for the child's assets, and have those all listed out, and then possibly even put into a dashboard so that your users can see in a real-time view all of the procedures that are currently either open or just all the procedures that have been created for a particular asset. All right, so now let me mention briefly Accelerate 2019. So we have a conference that's coming up in, Accelerate 2020. We have a conference that's coming up this year. So we have this every year. Apologize for the 19, but this slide hasn't been fixed with the new version quite yet. So this is coming up this year over in November. Should be the same dates. So we do this every year. It's a very big conference. We have a lot of guest speakers coming in to give their use case using eMaint and their experiences and how they've changed their processes around and improved them for the better. So I'm gonna pause the screen sharing now, and I'm going to go ahead and answer everyone's questions.